Kwa hivyo rais, tunakuambia wewe endelea kutembea, kwa sababu unatembea urudi mkono mtupu, unakuja na maendeleo. Sasa wale wengine wanapiga kelele. Huyo mwekezaji amesema kazi yake ni kujenga. Watu ya kujenga sio watu ya kupiga kelele. Kazi ya kujenga ni ngumu, lakini hii ya kupiga kelele na kubomoa ni kazi rahisi. So wewe rais, kaa kwa kazi ya kujenga. Rais ajenge asijenge? Atembee ng'ambo asitembee? Na akitembea akipata kitu anarudi hapa Mombasa. Tumekubaliana? Rais amekuwa nje hivi karibuni na tumesaidika, hatutaki kusema ni njia gani. Najua hii watu ya makamera wanatufuata kila pahali, tukisema kitu wanatuanika. Alafu ile watu wenye kutusaidia wanaanza kupiga kona. Hivi barabara zote zilikuwa zimeanza, tumepata usaidizi na hivi karibuni makontrakta watarudi kwa site na mtaona kazi ambayo inasonga.
This is going to be the theme of this podcast. Despite of Kenyan government coming out defend the foreign trips, we have seen decline and rejection of Kenya at the global stage. Welcome to the bold analysis. Within the last 3 weeks, William Samoei Ruto visited Saudi Arabia twice. And if in my earlier podcast, I debunked the narrative of going for jobs. And if you watch that video, you will confirm that it was never about the jobs and it was about investment. And after attending the 2 summits, the information coming out is that we have been left out of a 14 countries deal that are supposed to benefit, MOUs, that are supposed to benefit from the Saudi Investment Bank. Twice, William Ruto was in Saudi Arabia on 24th December and November, and then 7th November. All those visits, he met the Saudi Investment Fund team. And according to information that has just come out and has really shocked the country, is about how we have missed. This is it. Saudi Fund for Development signs deals to fund African projects. And they are saying the development loan, the 14 development loan agreements that was signed with 12 African ministers during the Saudi Arab African Economic Forum on Thursday cover the projects in healthcare, water, education, transport sectors, the firm confirmed. So it's water, education, healthcare, and transport sectors. If you look at that list, we are also in need. In education, we are struggling with the CBC. In healthcare, we are now having some project on community health promoters. On water, we have still the challenge of the dams. Transport, we're also running out e-mobility. Now, the projects include roads, schools, water facilities for African countries, and these countries include Mozambique, Niger, Burkina Faso, Benin, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Burundi, Malawi, Tanzania, Cape Verde, Rwanda, and Angola. Now, in the East African region, Rwanda and Tanzania has got, and we've missed. In the West, you can also see in this list that Niger and Burkina Faso, the countries that recently have experienced some coup d'etat, have benefited from this fund. But Kenya, despite of our president struggling and trying to do his best to project us as a country that is really also in need, we have missed out. And on one of the African presidents, we are the ones that have gone there twice. So that is something, and I want to explain more in it. Now, I decided to speak with his consent, a distinguished professor who is an ardent supporter of this channel, Professor Kamfuri. Yeah, Professor Kamfuri is based in South Africa. Now, the distinguished prof is on diplomatic policy. And I asked him about the trend why we are facing decline and rejection at that global stage. The first question he asked me here is, what do you think, what was your president's speech in Saudi Arabia during the two visits? And I want us to look at that because that is where I want us to delve. So there are two videos we will show you. The first one is the interview with some media house there on 24th November. And the kind of pitch that William Ruto made there, because that's what the prof has referred me to. And then we'll also look at his speech when he attended now the summit on 7th. Now, listen to this.
Africa is only receiving 2% of global investments for renewable energy projects, which is minuscule in terms of the energy needs. I want you to give me a breakdown in terms of why we have not seen money flowing into the continent and how you're hoping that's going to change going forward.
Thank you very much, Elena. And it's true. The last time we were in Nairobi, we were having a conversation that included how we see the new world and how Africa is going to be pivotal in how we take the next steps. And as you have said correctly, Africa has 30% of renewable, of our natural mineral resources, 40% of renewable energy. We have 60% of all arable uncultivated land, and we have the highest resources of carbon sinks. Now, we have challenges with investment. As you've said correctly, we got only $60 billion of investment in renewable energy out of a $3 trillion enterprise globally. And two things, maybe three, come into play. Number one is the erroneous assessment that Africa is risky. And our risk, the credit rating agencies have put Africa at a phenomenal level of risk, which is exaggerated. That's number one. Number two is that to be able to access capital for development with that assessment of risk means that if you go to the markets, you get 5 times, if you're lucky, 6 times, maybe 7 times.
But this is the thing, but this unbankable project, this whole thing of Africa not having bankable projects has been an age-old issue, and the fact that, you know, the perceptions of risk are still too high, but that doesn't coincide with the climate emergency that's playing out. There is a disconnect. The money needs to now flow in. The commitments that everyone's flowing around and saying, look, we're committing, is not becoming reality, but we're running out of time. So how do we convince the guys with the money to come to Africa and not be unreasonable about the returns that they're expecting?
It is the reason why, for example, we had the Africa Climate Summit, so that we can profile the assets that the continent has.
Now, you will understand that he's talking more about the renewable energy aspect, and he's talking more on an African platform. He's talking about Africa more than Kenya. In fact, he has not talked more about Kenya, he's talked more about Africa. So that is what the Prof said, that, and in the global stage, before you meet, and he said, he was making it very simply, that before you meet an investor, you must know that where are the priority areas of that investor. So that if you are making a pitch, you must make a pitch that meets where the priority areas. But if you look at what the Saudi Investment Fund has come to support those 14 countries, it borders roads, electricity, water, not electricity, it borders roads, education, dams, water. But there is nothing on the energy. So it shows something that Ruto made a pitch that probably did not sit well with them now. In November, he pitched more about the continent and not Kenya. In fact, there's no focus mostly on Kenya, but the primary focus was on the continent. I did understand that there is also a possibility that Ruto represented the an African Union track here. Now, but if he represents an African Union track here, then that also means that he has more leverage compared to other countries that are not even represented. If in any case he attended the summit, also represented an African Union track here, then if countries were to be picked to benefit, then we should be having some priority areas. This is what he said on the November, during the summit now.
My request to the Saudi friends is to support these African institutions so that they can support our own economies. And with what we have done in our continent, consolidating the African market of 1.3 billion people into one market under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we should be able to unlock the tremendous potential that exists. And therefore, this meeting becomes significant in that it not only addresses the present, but it also gives us opportunity to unlock the potential of the future. And therefore, this meeting is timely, and congratulations for convening so that we can unlock the tremendous potential that exists between our partnership. Between Saudi and Africa, we have the energy of the present and the energy of the future. The energy of the present, Saudi Arabia has tremendous resources of fossil fuels, maybe almost 20%. For the renewable energy of the future, Africa has 40% of wind, solar, hydro, geothermal.
There is something I wanted to point out, and the Professor Kamfur was telling me that he has sampled all those speeches, and he's telling me that you will realize that Ruto did not speak to what that fund, did not speak to the heart of those investors. Number one. Number two, in that global stage, it's never also about the world of fairness, that you've done a good speech and you've given us the African problem, you've profiled your country's challenge. No, he told me it's not like NGO. There are many other factors that comes into play before even a country is considered. And yes, we might have, the diplomatic policy professor is saying, we might have goofed in the presentation, or rather in the pitching while meeting those investors. But in real sense also, there are also other aspects, there are also other issues that behind the scene they have to consider before even narrowing on the 14 shortlist. Another question asked me, why do you think Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt are missing in that list? Because in Africa, those three countries have the largest population. So when William Ruto made a speech on the potential of Africa in terms of its population, then if that was a consideration, then in terms of these projects, Nigeria, Egypt, or South Africa, some of these countries could have benefited. We'll also have to make another observation that Niger and Burkina Faso, those two countries recently did a coup d'etat in Africa. And that coup, there is something normal about that coup. That coup was to kick out the French colonies in their country. And African Union really did not support that coup. In fact, was threatening them that they might be ejected from the African Union because of that coup. But in that summit, they have benefited. They're amongst the 14 countries that have been picked. While in us here, we made some praise about what is happening the other end. And so, that brings me to the next point. I want us to do internal introspecting. And the big question here is, why are we having the funding decline? Recently, there was a trip. We had a trip to China. We were seeking the extension of the SGR to Uganda. And we did not go with Uganda. We went as Kenya. There is no clarity of whether it was allowed, but that we were offered. But the information that came out is that China is a bit cagey on the nitty-gritties of that loan, or rather extending that loan to this country, giving us that loan. So that is why I wanted to find out, the good professor to help me understand why we have the decline at that global stage. And we've narrowed it down to these three key pillars. Kindly subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell and like our videos. Thank you very much for supporting us. And if you're coming to this country, and not you're coming, or rather, during this holiday, if you're planning to move from one place to the other, or even relocate your office, then you must work with a professional and reliable company that will ensure the safety of your treasures. And that is why I recommend to you the Topmark Movers. The Topmark Movers is the best company in town to help you in your mobility of your movement of your office items, or house or office staff, or household items from one place to the other. You can visit their website there, www.topmarkmovers.co.ke, or you can as well contact them directly through their number 0719 17 43 93. Topmark Movers, quality is everything. Now, let's get into this, and make sure you don't miss this other part, because I think in analysis, this is the part I like most. Our foreign policy, the good professor is telling me that our foreign policy on some sensitive global issues is worrying, is denting. And he used a good example. At the onset of the Israel-Palestine war, we actually, from Nairobi here, we were the first African country, and he reminded me, we were the first African country to react to that war. And our reaction, we stood with Israel. Only for, as the war then escalated, the whole country, the world seemed to have shown some hostility against Israel. And when William Ruto was there, and we even asked, he had to make a U-turn, and change his other position on this war. And the issue is not about change. The issue here is we even rushed to throw our statements on this.
Your contribution on matters peace, the Jeddah process, which IGAD, under our chair, the President of Djibouti, is engaged in, we believe will unlock the challenges in Sudan, and your participation in this region will also give us the opportunity to also deal with the challenges that are going on between Israel and Palestine. We believe that terrorism cannot be an answer to any conflict. Neither is occupation. We believe that Palestine should be a free state, and we stand for a two-nation solution as a means of resolving the conflict in that region. And thank you very much for your participation in convening this meeting. I thank you. We have a young and growing population both in Saudi Arabia and Africa. 65% of Africa's population is below 30, and close to 40% of the population of Saudi Arabia is below 30. On average, between our two regions, Saudi Arabia and Africa, our average age is 25. And with a population of close to 1.5.
In fact, the question here is, the African Saudi summit, where did we even have to bring in that issue of Israel and Palestine? He's asked me. Do you think it was a must? Do you think it was necessary? The answer is no. And if you follow that, the professor has also told me that there was no single African president or African country, and African countries have been so cagey and silently they have been playing a neutral card on some of these issues. So we've been goofing around it, and we seem to forget that we are in a global community where sometimes what you see people saying when you see presidents, that there are quite many other presidents and many other countries in the continent that are actually in support of Israel, and the continent is divided. There are those who support Israel for their own interest. There are those who want to support Palestine for their own interest. But as we've been having a problem of not playing the neutral card. And he's given me another one. Niger. During the Niger coup, Kenya was first to castigate the soldiers. And we said, we don't want it. But now look at the people that we fell. We were feeling like, they were odd one out in Africa. They've gotten that deal. We have missed by our pitch to be the westernized. That is the one concept. Number two, the negative debt profile. Our debt profile is, the profile is dented by two issues, two factors. Number one, there's a report, I think, from intelligence economist something from US, who said that we are at the risk, at one point we are at the risk of defaulting. But even without looking at the global space, look at locally, some stories that have been coming out, that have been published about our debts are even worrying for development partners, because people think that we are a bit irresponsible. There are reports about irresponsibility. Look at these two screenshots. Number one, controller of budget raises alarm over 15.3 billion spent without approval. And if you read that article, it says that probably that money might have gone to people's pockets. The other one, Kenya paid 2 billion for loans it never got, says Nyakano. So let's look at it. Even if you are the investor, you want to come to invest here. But with that kind of debt profile, you remember, even that thing is a loan. We cannot. Because of even that debt profile. Our debt profile, the other example is G2G. If you look at the details of G2G, one of the companies in that G2G is actually from Saudi Arabia. Yes. So the Saudi Mafuta, we've been having inconsistencies with it, because we even dispatched a team to go and start convincing them to reschedule the repayment. So maybe because this thing is from the same place, there are so many other factors, and that is playing against us. In terms of our discipline with the money, with the funding, is not instilling confidence on these investors. Lastly, the climate agenda that William Ruto is pursuing has largely been profiled as a Western affair. And with that, Prof is saying that the perception that it's a West agenda maybe is not resonating with the East investors. And we will confirm that during the COP28 that will happen in Dubai. We will see. He told me, let's wait and see what you can see what they actually what this is all about. I just want to get a story here. I wanted to look at this. I wanted to look at this. Saying, African Climate Summit hijacked by Western nations pushing hidden agenda. These were civil society organizations that really blamed William Ruto on this, and this was saying, this is what was published. Rather than advancing Africa's interest and position on critical climate issues, the summit has been seized by Western governments the consultancy companies and philanthropic organizations hell-bent on pushing a pro-West agenda and interest at the expense of Africa. Even more worrying, the agenda of the summit has been unduly influenced by the US-based consultancy firm McKinsey & Company. The lead African officials and ministers have been pushed on the back burner. Now, that's it. Saying, we went to Saudi Arabia and Ruto is pitching more on the climate aspect, but maybe it's not exciting to them. And that is why we are not getting the best rating at the global stage. Thank you. I don't know what to think. I think on this, I know I like rating myself. This is my best this month.